Do you have an opinion on Fournette?
Oh, hell yeah, on that. Do I love Fournette? No. At running back 15, yes, for strictly sheer volume.
You're listening to Let's Talk Fantasy Football, where men of fantasy genius have realized, hey guys, we don't need real football skills to dominate on the fantasy field. Yeah. So slap on your pads and grab your helmet. Shit's about to get real.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I'm your host tonight. My name is Nick Walsh, and I am here with my good friend who's ready to talk a little bit of AFC South with me, and that is Matt Rodgers. Rodgers, what's going on, dude?
What's up, Walsh? I love fantasy football, but what I really am passionate about is the AFC South. That's what just gets me going.
Oh yeah, dude, and that's completely understandable. It's a great division that is not at all often very terrible. That's pretty much all I need to say on this.
It's the reason why I play fantasy football, honestly, AFC South.
Yeah, I mean, Marcus Mariota is my reason for living in general. So, I guess that's just how it is sometimes. But yeah, we're going to get into the AFC South. This will be part one of the AFC South tonight, guys. That's going to be the Colts and the Jaguars. Part two will be coming out at another time. That is going to be the Titans and the Texans. If you're looking for other divisions, this is the last one that we're doing. We have gotten through every other single one. So you can go back, listen to whatever you missed. Keep in mind the timing of, when these episodes came out. I will say for posterity's sake, because I don't know when this will be released, things change fast at this point in the NFL preseason. So we are recording this on August 15th. The Mets are currently up 7-1 against the Atlanta Braves. The Raiders are currently playing the Cardinals in preseason football. I have it recording. I do not know anything that has happened so far because I am watching the Mets live. That's where we're at. Just know if, fucking Eric Ebron tears his ACL tomorrow. We didn't know that.
Yeah, good disclaimer, because honestly, right now we're in prime mock draft season, but we're also getting on the fringe of actual fantasy draft season.
Oh yeah, dude! I have my first draft on Saturday this weekend. I'm driving.
Wow!
I'm driving down to Santa Barbara for a good old live draft. I'm pretty excited. I mean, the live draft the draft for your home league is a week from tomorrow, and then our big draft. Our main league is in just about 2 weeks. So I mean, we're right in the thick of it here. And now that we are finishing, these division previews, we will have the podcasts up until the season starts. We'll probably focus in on draft strategy, guys that we like taking, as well as just updates on all the preseason news and risers and fallers, all that kind of good stuff. I've been kind of making a list the past couple of days of late round guys who I want to end up with in a lot of leagues. So I'm sure we'll get into that content at some point. But for right now, Rodgers, we got the AFC South. You got anything else before we jump right into it?
No, man, let's do it. Send me your late round guys though, because I got nothing on that. So I'd like to know what you're working with.
Fair enough. Just got a notification. Dwayne Haskins. 55-yard touchdown to Robert Davis, who I believe Robert Davis caught a touchdown last week as well. That's against the Bengals. Andy Dalton threw a pick six before.
That changes everything.
I know, right?
That changes literally everything.
I know. That just my whole draft board just went nuts from that one touchdown.
Start the podcast over. Start it over.
Fair enough. All right, let's get right into the Colts here. No real big picture changes. Obviously Frank Reich and their management have done a great job with this team. They went from sort of being like an untalented team with a very talented quarterback to all of a sudden their offensive line is good. Their defense is, solid to passable. They have a lot of weapons now on the outside, barring any injuries, which there were a lot of them last year. And Frank Reich really, in my view, seems like one of the best coaches in the NFL at this point. He is very about fitting the schemes and the game plans to the players that he has available, as well as to, opponents' strengths and weaknesses. So they were running a lot of 2 tight end sets early in the year. When Jack Doyle got hurt, they stopped running 2 tight end sets. They didn't force that kind of thing just because that was what they had been practicing with. So, I'm pretty bullish on the Colts as a whole. What do you think of this team as a whole this year?
No, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I feel like the Colts have now taken the next step to where, like, if you go back a couple of years to the Chuck Pagano era, like, here's a really star-studded offense that should be okay, and now it's like, here's a pretty decent offense that could actually make noise and be relatively really, really good, statistically, at least for fantasy purposes. So I agree with you on the whole Frank Reich regime. I think that there's a lot of value there for what we're going to talk about, at least. Don't know what the Colts are going to do in the NFL, but for the purposes of this, I think there's a lot of value to be had in the Colts this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start with at the quarterback position with Andrew Luck. He is currently going quarterback 4. That's the 7th pick in the 6th round. I should say again, all these ADPs are 12-team PPR on Fantasy Football Calculator. Andrew Luck, we all know he's a stud. We all know he's great. Obviously, he was incredible last year. If you owned him in fantasy, it was very good for you, particularly down the stretch. That being said, Andrew Luck, and stop me if you've heard this before, Andrew Luck has a preseason injury. Can you believe it?
Oh, my God.
So at first they said it was a calf issue. Then it was like a small bone issue in his ankle. Now they're saying it's kind of like a high ankle issue. And then the most recent, I guess, quote about it I saw was that it's like an accumulation of multiple things. So I don't know what the fuck that means. But it's concerning. Like they're saying they're cautiously optimistic that he'll play week 1, but that's not the kind of thing that I want to hear if I'm drafting this guy in the 6th round.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think quarterback, we'll talk about that, but it's overvalued. We stress that a lot on this podcast. The ADP is way too high for the whole quarterback position. But I will say that in the past, it's been possibly worse preseason for Andrew Luck's forecast of what he could do for the season. So I think almost all of these like little minor injuries that you said are accumulating, I think what they're pretty much saying is like, we're just going to let this guy chill until football matters, sort of. So, I mean, I get the hesitancy as it should be there, and for the ADP, of course, but I think as far as what we've seen from Andrew Luck and what he's done in the past at this stage in the fantasy football season, it's same story type shit,
Okay, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, certainly last year there were issues with the arm strength and all of that. I just know, and this is from personal experience with drafting Andrew Luck a lot last year, was that he came out kind of slow due to injury, and I drafted him in a bunch of leagues. Thought I got a pretty good price on him, and then basically immediately dropped him because it's quarterback. I'm not going to wait around a couple of weeks to see if Andrew Luck comes around. Right. I can go pick up fucking, I don't know, like Lamar Jackson on a good matchup or whatever instead. Or there's a million things you can do at quarterback in terms of the waiver wire. So I ended up dropping him in every single league and picking up other people to stream. And then it turns out he was a stud later in the year. I could see that exact same sort of thing happening this year. I guess depending on your league, he's, if you draft Andrew Luck, you're taking another quarterback, right? You have to.
Yeah, I mean, you have to at this point, at least for insurance purposes, fine. But the way I look at it is you don't want to pay that 6th round price. Like, you're right in what you did last year. Mm-hmm. You bailed on him because quarterback, we stress it all the time, is that it's a very deep position streaming. There's so much value at quarterback 15, fine. You shouldn't be paying up for quarterback 6 unless you're willing to take another quarterback in round 14. You have to. You absolutely have to if you're going to pay that price.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll kind of see what happens, and obviously there's going to be more news on Luck as we get closer to the season. Right now it sounds like we're both pretty cautious just due to the price, but it sounds like you're a little bit more willing to, invest and see what happens than I am. Jacoby Brissett is the backup, so we'll see if he gets any action. If he does, honestly, Jacoby Brissett hasn't been bad. In this offense, I think if he's going to play, he's within the fantasy streamer type of conversation at any point during the year. But again, we'll see what happens with Luck's health.
Yeah, I mean, I would go as far as to say that I don't think you should pay 6th round, 7th pick where he's going right now. But if you are willing to pay that price, then I think that you should be on the boat of picking up Jacoby Brissett in the 14th, 15th round. Because if you're taking Luck that early, health is your only hesitancy. So you obviously like the system and everything like that. There's no reason why he can't be your quarterback handcuff, if you will, to Luck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it totally does. Because, I mean, if Brissett's starting, he's probably just as valuable as other guys you'd get in that area of the draft anyway. It's
right.
not like...
and that's not what I think is like prudent, but I think if you're willing to pay a 6th round price on Luck, then you're buying into something more than Andrew Luck, and you're buying into the situation.
Right. That is definitely true. That's a very good point. Let's move on to the pass catchers. It should be a lot more deep than last year where, Chester Rogers and Zach Pasquale or whatever, we're getting 6 to 7 targets a game. It all starts, though, with T.Y. Hilton, who is currently going wide receiver 12, 3rd pick in the 3rd round. T.Y. had a career year last year, and he's been raved about in camp. Everyone's saying he's having the best camp ever, which take it all with a grain of salt, but it's certainly good to hear. Last year, he was wide receiver 14 in only 14 games, and he was sort of on and off the injury report a lot of the year, too. It's notable that he spent a lot less time in the slot last year. They kind of put him outside almost full time. I think that'll probably happen again with the additions that they've made. So, T.Y. Hilton to me seems like a rock solid pick at that point. What's your opinion on him?
Yeah, I mean, in the past, I think last podcast, I forget what we were talking about, where there's very few people in fantasy that I've never owned and never would touch, and T.Y. Hilton was one of those guys. I've been wrong when I've done it, and I've been overly bullish, if you will, and last year proved it so more than any other year. The guy was getting like 9+ targets, over 5 receptions per game for his type of style. He's always had like the inconsistency, low floor, high ceiling type of vibe about him. I don't think that's fair anymore. I do think that he is a true like low end number 1 in a 12-team league. I don't know if I'm going to do it again, and it's more hinging on Andrew Luck than it is T.Y. Hilton. But I think his price and where he's going is something that I can totally admit. Like that is, every time that I will not take him, at some point I'll regret it for sure. Okay,
yeah, I ended up with a ton of T.Y. Hilton last year, which I didn't really intend on doing. It just kind of happened because I went after the number 3 pick to get David Johnson, and then T.Y. Hilton just was a guy who was going at the right time in the 2nd round a lot of the time. So, I mean, I'm not actively targeting him this year, but if I end up with him, I am totally cool with that. I'm very happy with it. The rest of the pass catching, sorry.
I was literally just going to say I would sum it up with his price is perfect.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't move him up or down, really. The rest of the pass catchers, they've brought in 2 new weapons here to replace the aforementioned Chester Rogers and Zach Pasquale. Devin Funchess, who is currently the 12th pick in the 11th round, that's wide receiver 53. And then rookie Paris Campbell, who is currently the 9th pick in the 12th round, that's wide receiver 56. Do you have strong opinions on either of these guys, Rodgers?
I wouldn't say strong opinions. I'm going personal bias with Funchess a little bit. You know how every single year on the Colts, whether it's like Dante Moncrief, and we'll get into this in a second, Eric Ebron, there's always that guy where it's like you're scoring way too many touchdowns than you should, right? I feel like that could be Devin Funchess this year. I think that I'm not saying that Devin Funchess should be like a high reach or anything like that based on where he's going, but I've always liked Devin Funchess as not a number 1 receiver, but a great end zone threat. And we'll get into Ebron a little bit more in the tight end situation. But I definitely think that Funchess can work into a wide receiver 4 on a certain type of drafted team where I think you could throw him out there with the expectation that he could catch a touchdown every single week, possibly more. And I think that his ceiling might actually be higher now, not being a wide receiver 1, than it was with the Panthers when he was with Cam.
Okay.
That's just
I think that's a fair take. That could totally be a thing. And you're right. Like Moncrief, when he was with the Colts, you would play him not because you expected a 100-yard game, but because you expected 53 yards and a touchdown, And like that seems like the type of role that Devin Funchess could absolutely settle into on this team. I don't really have a strong opinion on him either way. I'm fine with taking him where he is. there's really been no news, good or bad, on him like since training camp. It's just kind of like no one's raving about Devin Funchess, but no one is saying that he's in danger of losing a job or anything like that. Excuse me, either. So I guess we'll kind of see what happens. In terms of Paris Campbell, just some background on him. He's a second-round rookie out of Ohio State. He's sort of known as like a gadget player, like a move around the formation and get the ball and very close to the line of scrimmage. I think he had like an average depth of target of something like 3 yards, like in his like last season at college, which is just like, how does that even possibly happen? That being said, he's impressed running routes in OTAs. The beat reporters were kind of raving about him as a route runner, as a guy, because that's not something they really expected. But he currently has a hamstring injury, recently suffered a setback, so that's certainly something to monitor there. I'm fine with drafting Paris Campbell. I'm not like actively targeting him, but he's a guy who should be on the field a lot in what should be a pretty prolific offense.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat where the Colts and Andrew Luck have proven a bunch of times that 4 receiving options can be relevant, and we'll get to the tight ends in a second, like we said. Late round flyer style, sure. PPR, obviously a little bit more. But again, someone like him and T.Y. Hilton, guy like Paris Campbell and them drafting him where they did is almost why I like Devin Funchess a little bit more. I'm not targeting Paris Campbell. Late round flyer, it's all the same boat with stuff like that. He's an injury away from being a number 2 to one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. So that's the way I look at it.
Fair enough. They also have Deion Kane on the team. He's not going to be fantasy relevant, but he was impressive in camp last year and then missed the whole year after an injury. He is back with them as well, and I kind of like him. Anyway, that doesn't really matter too much. Let's go to the tight end. We have Eric Ebron being drafted as tight end number 8. That is the 8th pick in the 7th round, and fuck, is that too early?
I mean, yeah, dude. I mean, tight end, every draft that I go to, apart from our serious league, is tight end is ridiculously overvalued. I don't understand it. You know me, I was an Ebron owner in a lot of leagues last year. I don't like it at all. That's way too early, man.
Yeah, I mean, like he had that career year, but a lot of it was, one, he caught way more touchdowns than he ever has in his entire career. And 2, they didn't have anyone else to throw to. Like, there was a game last year where I think T.Y. Hilton was out, and it was like, yeah, of course Ebron had like 8 catches and 2 touchdowns. He's the only guy on the field who is worthy of being even like on the field at this point. So yeah, of course Ebron had this great year. But when Jack Doyle was playing, he was on the field less than half the snaps. So I mean,
that's exactly what I was just going to say. And like, as far as I think he could be a top 15 tight end for sure. Want to throw him in the streamer conversation, tight end roulette, fine. But you can't draft him off the fact that Jack Doyle may be injured. Jack Doyle is the preferred tight end there. We just talked about Devin Funchess, which if you think that there's an outlier situation of touchdowns in that offense, fine. But I think there's a bunch of different hedges to that all the way around. I don't like, if you want to take Ebron as your number 1 tight end in a 12-team league, okay. 7th round, absolutely not. Ridiculous.
Yeah, completely insane. I mean, and I'm not saying that like when Jack Doyle's on the field, he'll be out there less than half the time like this year. Last year happened. Like, it would be silly to not take that into account and use Ebron more. But still, just so many more mouths to feed. Last year, he was a target funnel who overproduced or got more touchdowns than he should have based on the amount of time he was on the field and all that jazz. So to me,
yeah. And do I think that can happen again? Yes. Do I think that it will be as explosive as it was?
Yeah, absolutely. As we mentioned, Jack Doyle is there. I don't think he's really worth drafting in fantasy. He'll probably be on the field more than Ebron, but they're going to use him in line, and they'll probably use Ebron as sort of that move tight end a little bit more. It's worth noting, too, that they've talked about Mo Alley Cox, who is their 3rd-string tight end, as someone that they want to get involved more this year. That might just be coach speak, because I don't really see a path to that happening. But it's worth noting that they have brought him up in conversations at this point. Do you have any opinions on those two guys? Or
No, just that the conversation kind of hedges the tight end price of what we just discussed.
All right, cool. Let's move on to the running backs here. So we have Marlon Mack going 10th pick in the third round. That is running back 18. Mack had some incredible games last year. He's, he showed he can carry the load as that early down guy, and when they get out ahead, he can be the guy that they give the ball to and be successful. Are you willing to buy him at this price?
So where is he going right now? Running back 18. I would say yes, I'm willing to buy him at that price in a certain situation. More of like a he could be my running back 1 in a zero running back strategy type thing. Obviously, he's had injury concerns. What I'm concerned about mostly is that when the Colts are not winning games, he is way more relevant than you would be comfortable with for a guy you're drafting as a 3-down back. Like, I think he had I was just reading some statistics on when the Colts were losing in games, which isn't a thing that you can't count on, that he had less than 12 or 13 touches in 4 straight games. And then Nyheim Hines, who we'll talk about in a second, starts stealing receptions. I do believe that they want to lean on him as a 3-down back or a 3-down back. But at that price, and I'm looking at guys like Kerryon Johnson and dudes like that, I'm a little bit more hesitant in the third round to have him potentially be my number 1 running back, depending on how I draft my team.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Just because, like you said, he is so game script dependent. The Colts have 2 running backs who they feature, and they feature them situationally. So Mack is going to be the guy who's in there if they're winning, and if they're down, it's going to be Hines. For perspective on where he's being drafted, the 2 guys going right after him are Josh Jacobs and Chris Carson. I would take both of them ahead of Marlon Mack because I don't think there are situations with their respective teams where the 2 of them are completely written out of a game plan. Whereas with Marlon Mack, say they come out, pick 6 first drive, and then, touchdown from the other team's second drive, all of a sudden you're down 14-0. I don't know that Marlon Mack is too involved in the game for the entire rest of the game. So you're sort of widening your range of outcomes on a game-to-game basis. And this high in the draft, I'm looking for someone who is going to produce a certain floor every single week. I don't think that Mack has that floor.
I agree with that completely. Because also the Colts have proven the pre-Mac era that when their teams have been a little more relevant, that is, I know different coach, different regime and everything like that, but that's the way they go, is that they will game script it hard. And that I would not be surprised if you're down big to the Texans in week 12, 13, which you're kind of drafting for, is that Mac can kind of go and disappear a little bit. And again, great running back flex type low end 2 situation, but third round.
Yeah, and it is, I mentioned Jacobs and Carson. I do think those are the only guys that are behind Mack that I would really take ahead of him for the most part. He's sort of the start of a tier of running backs that all have that same sort of issue that I was just talking about, where they're game script or game plan dependent, like the Marlon Mack, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, Phillip Lindsay, James White, all these guys going here, Sony Michel, Tevin Coleman. All of these guys are a little bit more situational or game script dependent. So I don't think Mack is terribly overpriced relative to running backs. He's just, to me, I don't think I'm going to end up with him, because if I'm in this situation and he's the number 1 guy on the board for me, there are 4 other running backs right after that I think also have the same sort of upside and are situational. And it's just an overpay. The end of the third round is an overpay for a situational running back. So it's
right. And I agree. And we saw games last year where guys like Jordan Wilkins, who are irrelevant in preseason fantasy drafts, where Mack was kind of on the fringe of health and definitely the number 1 guy, but that like Jordan Wilkins, they were willing to give that workload to a little bit to almost hedge Marlon Mack's injury a little bit. You know what I mean? I feel like they have a little bit of faith in other guys to sort of spread the ball around a little bit, to where I don't know if Marlon Mack, who has been injury prone a little bit, is halfway there that they're going to give him 25 touches a game necessarily. And Josh Jacobs, Chris Carson, guys like that have that ability week in and week out.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move on to Nyheim Hines, who we spoke about as sort of the guy they'll go to when they're down. They like him more in the pass game. He's currently running back 57. That's the 9th pick in the 13th round. For me, it's a little like, sure, it's the end of the 13th round. Like, take whoever the hell you want. But, like, Nyheim Hines to me doesn't have upside because if Mac gets hurt, Hines is not going to take over his role. He's going to be a situational guy, and it'll be hard to predict because it's going to be hard to predict when the Colts go down. Like, I think they're going to be favorites in a lot of their games this year. So, like, games where they go down and he's featured heavily, I'm not sure that you're going to, like, have the foresight to be like, I need Nyheim Hines in my lineup this week.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good point. I would look at it as, like, two years ago, Theo Riddick in a way worse situation.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, yes, he will be relevant. He will have his role, but you know that, I mean, Theo Riddick had moments, obviously, where he was a clear-cut starter, but, like, I don't think that, you know, when you have him that you have a limited situation. And to your point, yes, where regardless of what you're drafting him for, and you draft running backs this late based on the Hail Mary of maybe an injury gives you a top 20 running back, I don't think he has that upside in the same way that you said it. I'm just looking at it that way, where he's that receiving guy. Mac gets hurt. I don't think his role changes that much as far as, like, goal to go inside the numbers type guys.
Right, absolutely. The rest of the guys on the roster are Deontay Foreman, who they just picked up after he was waived from the Texans. Jordan Wilkins, Jonathan Williams, and Spencer Ware are all there. You know, I'm mildly interested in Deontay Foreman, but nothing that you need to worry about drafting here.
No, but I'll ask you this, is that with Mac's injury history and what we just discussed, that could be 3 of the best preseason 3 to 5 running backs on the depth chart. They won't all make it out of camp, but would you not agree that that's a filthy 3, 4, 5 in a running back core in week 2 of 3 of the preseason?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's like,
so I'm asking why.
Yeah, I mean, there are teams. We'll talk about the Jaguars, who, you know, like their backup is like Alfred Blue. It's like, fuck, you know, like these are good backups. And you're right, Mac does have a bit of an injury history. We just talked about how Hines isn't going to pick up that role. So, not like you should know which guy is next on the depth chart, basically. After these guys, like, but when they release their final depth chart right before the season, like the guy who's third on there after Mac and Hines is a name to circle and just keep in the back of your brain if a Mac injury were to happen.
Right. I mean, I'm nitpicking and overanalyzing, but there's like Todd Gurley concerns with his like scaled back shit and health or whatever, and those teams aren't going out and signing Jonathan Williams and Spencer Ware as insurance. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And overanalyzing to the max, but it's there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think that'll do it for the Colts. Let's move on to the Jaguars. So the Jaguars have a brand new quarterback in Nick Foles. So we'll see how that goes for them. They also have a brand new offensive coordinator in John DeFilippo. DeFilippo, just for some background, has historically been very pass heavy, which is why he got fired from the Vikings last year, despite like them like having a pretty decent offense when he got fired. It was because Mike Zimmer wanted to run the ball, which makes it a weird fit to come to the Jaguars to me, because Doug Marrone also wants to run the ball and play defense. So it's like you have this certain philosophy. You're hiring a guy who just got fired for not adhering to that philosophy, which, again, a little bit bizarre, but we'll see what happens. We'll see if Marrone takes the reins here and you know, makes it a run-heavy team, or if DeFilippo is allowed to sort of open things up a little bit and sling the pig around a little bit with Nick Foles. Foles is not being drafted. Do you think he should be?
No.
Cool. Me neither. At the wide receiver position, they have one person being drafted. It is D.D. Westbrook. He's currently the 8th pick in the 8th round. That's wide receiver 37. And it seems like, based on their depth chart and who they sat out in the first preseason game, it seems like their top 3 wide receivers are going to be D.D. Westbrook, DJ Shark, and Chris Conley, who came over from the Chiefs for them. Marquise Lee is not entirely healthy. Keelan Cole, who was kind of like a hot sleeper last year, appears to have been phased out. And they do have Terrell Pryor, but it doesn't seem like he's really made any headway in climbing up that depth chart. So starting with Westbrook, I guess, do you have any interest in drafting any of these guys? Do you have like a preferred anyone on this wide receiver core?
So the preferred choice is Westbrook, but here's what I'll ask you. He's going wide receiver 37, 8th pick in the 8th round, right? We saw Funchess before. I'm not sure where he was, 11th pick, wherever, right? Who would you rather have be your wide receiver for? D.D. Westbrook or Devin Funchess on the Colts?
Yeah, I think it's probably Funchess. I just don't know what role Westbrook has.
I think it's Funchess. Exactly. And Westbrook could be a decent, like, he could finish top 38 in fantasy and whatever it is, fine. You got to look at it this way at some point, is that who are you going to fucking pull the trigger on and start, right? Are you ever, unless something is proven for a long period of time on the Jaguars wide receiving core, are you ever going to say, yes, I will start D.D. Westbrook? No. Funchess is a guy where I don't think that he may not even have as for lack of a better term, profitable fantasy season as D.D. Westbrook would, but that is a guy that I am comfortable putting in the right matchup and saying, I think this guy can get me 11 PPR points for sure. D.D. Westbrook, you're never going to fucking know unless something happens in the first 4 to 5 weeks that indicates otherwise. But right now when I'm drafting, I want no part of this. Why would I?
I think part of it is that there is so much uncertainty with this offense. You know, I just kind of talked about how we don't really know how DeFilippo is going to run this offense, how they do have a new quarterback. Like, all of these things are just very, very uncertain, and that seems like a high price to pay for D.D. Westbrook when you can get guys like Curtis Samuel and Marquez Valdez-Scantling after him. Like, Corey Davis is going after him. Like, these are people who, like, people who I'm much more comfortable with are going after D.D. Westbrook.
Even if you took Westbrook in the 11th as your wide receiver 5, right? Honestly, I'll ask you, what would it take for you to put him in the lineup, in your fantasy lineup, whenever it is? What would it take?
It would be high target volume right off the bat. It would have to be like week one. Sorry?
No, I was saying, yes, absolutely high target volume, and you're still not doing it till week 4.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those because, again, I like my thinking is that they're going to try and run the ball a decent amount. So like last year's Jaguars, like week 1, it was like Keelan Cole had a bunch of targets, and then week 2, Dante Moncrief had them, and week 3, D.D. Westbrook had them. You know, it was just like none of it was consistent. It was like the Dolphins last year too. Like you knew there was going to be some sort of fantasy production, and you didn't know where it was going to come from. So it makes it really, really hard to actually do anything about it.
Right.
It's a situation where I am not actively looking to draft any of these wide receivers.
I agree.
That could change.
Sorry. I was just going to say, is the price right? You know, as theoretically, yes. But you don't think that every single week you pull the trigger on D.D. Westbrook, Chris Conley's not putting up 14 to 15 PPR points? You're crazy.
Yeah, like if DJ Shark or like Chris Conley have some big plays or show some chemistry with Foles in like the second and third preseason games, like tight. Maybe I'll add them to my list of guys that I'm targeting in the 12th to 14th round. But until that point, I don't really see why I would need to draft anyone here. At the tight end position, we have Jeff Swaim and James O'Shaughnessy. Should we move to running backs?
Correct. Yes. Please.
Okay. So here's the real meat of the Jaguars, where we have Leonard Fournette. Obviously, he's currently going the 4th pick in the 3rd round. That's running back 15. Leonard Fournette's brief career has been injury riddled and inefficient, I would say, is the 2 words or phrases that I would use to describe him. That being said, like I'm kind of optimistic on him and like kind of talking myself more and more into him at running back 15. Do you have an opinion on Fournette?
Oh, hell yeah, on that. Do I love Fournette? No. At running back 15, yes. For strictly sheer volume. Sheer volume. Like, look at the running. I can't quote it right now. I could look it up, but the running backs going ahead of him is that why did anybody draft Fournette in the 1st round last year? As a guy that did it, or early 2nd round, if you will, was for sheer volume. And this is potentially and arguably a better situation. Obviously, health is a concern. All that stuff, whatever. But when you're talking about running back 15, 16, whatever, I'd rather have him than Marlon Mack. And while he's a higher price, it's close. And theoretically, I think he's a way better buy than Marlon Mack on that, solely because, yes, are you shooting a shot that may miss and he could fuck you for 7 or 8 weeks? Fine. But I am willing to pay that price at early third round, running back 15, more than I am Marlon Mack, because at Marlon Mack's best and Leonard Fournette and Marlon Mack's optimization season, Leonard Fournette wins every single time.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm kind of optimistic on him getting more passing work as well, because he's coming into the season a bit lighter. They've talked about wanting to use him in the pass game. And looking at the backs behind him, there's Alfred Blue, Raquel Armstead, and Thomas Rawls. I don't really know a ton about Armstead, but I do know that none of these guys are like pass catching specialists. Like they're not, you don't have a Theo Riddick or, like that kind of player on this team who's going to come in and get the targets in the out of the backfield. So to me, there's a lot of, we were talking about it with Mac. Mac isn't going to be in the game in certain game scripts. Leonard Fournette is in the game in every game script. To me, that makes it worth it in the early third round just based on that. And you know what? If he turns out to increase his efficiency, get better than his 3.3 yards per carry or whatever he got last year, then great. That's just kind of an added bonus at that point. So there's a very, very high floor. Outside of injuries, there is a very, very high floor on Leonard Fournette, and I'm about it. I can do it.
Yeah, I agree. At that price especially, that's all I'm saying is with that. Because, like you said, Armstead, I think, has been banged up, pretty injured in the preseason. I may be wrong on that. I thought that I had seen that earlier. But in the past, what's a better situation for the Jaguars around him? TJ Yeldon, Chris Ivory type shit. They're not doing that right now. Thomas Rawls, you snag, whatever. But I think that as far as upside goes, he has running back one upside. He does.
Yeah.
And you can't really say that as definitively for a lot of the running backs between 15 and 22 or 14 and 22. Again, I'm not citing names, but I can confidently say that, I think.
Yeah, there's one guy behind him who I would take above him, and that's Devontae Freeman. Outside of that, I think he's completely appropriately priced. And you're right, there is a lot of upside there. So despite being inefficient, injury-riddled, and disappointing to this point in his career, the two of us, it seems like, just can't quit Leonard Fournette. So anyway, I think that'll do it for the Jags. You got anything else before we wrap this one up here?
I mean, you're right. I can't quit Leonard Fournette. I know Big Macs are healthy for me, but when you discount it by $1, then I'm going to buy a bunch of Big Macs, bro.
What a good analogy.
I buy a Big Mac again at $6, but you're going to tell me they're $4.50? Then I'm going to buy a bunch of Big Macs.
All right. I think that'll do it for part one of the AFC South. Rodgers and I will be back with part two. That's going to be the Titans and the Texans. So make sure to keep an eye out for that. You got anything to leave the people with? It's mock draft season, dude. You've been mock drafting?
I've been mock drafting. Look for Will Smith in the fantasy football calculator mock drafts. That's my go-to. Getting jiggy with it.
Well, there you go.
Let's see.
I've been doing the best ball drafts, sort of as like the draft app or whatever, where you join a league for $1 that pays the winner $5. I've been doing those as my mock drafts.
That sounds like my New York City subway rides. I try and buy $1, sell a couple dollars.
There you go. All right, so we'll be back, guys. Keep an eye out. But until next time, this is for Rodgers. I am Walsh. And for Let's Talk I fucked it up again. For Rodgers. For Let's Talk Fantasy Football. I am Walsh. Later, podcast.
This has been Let's Talk Fantasy Football. Thanks for listening.